To begin the ornament, I'm going to stitch the first layer of the double crosses that form the outline for the ornament. And I'm going to begin with a pin stitch. I'm holding the tail on the back. I'm going to take one stitch over one canvas thread. I'm going to take another stitch over the same canvas thread, and then I'm going to take another stitch over one canvas thread, but ending in the same hole where I began my pin stitch. Okay, so this should anchor the thread very securely. And now I'm going to begin my double cross. I'm going to stitch right over my pin stitch, 4 canvas threads up, and then I'm going to make a crossing stitch right in the center of it. And I'm going to stitch 15 of these double crosses on one side of my area. I'm going to be making a diamond shape. You'll see that my stitches are sharing holes. And I'm not stitching all of the double cross at this point because I'm going to stitch the second layer with a different color. And for the purposes of the class, if you can stitch this much, it will make counting the star stitch much faster and easier because you won't have to count the length of each stitch. You will place it in relationship to this double cross border. I finished stitching this border off camera because it's just boring to watch a person do the same stitch over and over again. But it doesn't take very long to do this. You're doing the same stitch over and over again. You're sharing holes. And so the counting is really easy. And you shouldn't need to look at your diagram because there are 15 of these little upright crosses on each side of this diamond. So now I'm finished with this thread. I'm just going to pull it off to the side and leave it for right now. I'll weave the ends in later. And I'm going to set up to stitch the star. Now I'm going to use 2 needles for stitching the star. And it is going to take I think it's going to take about, well, I'm going to start with a yard. Not quite sure how much it's going to take to stitch one of the layers, but we'll see how far this goes. And my stretcher bars are 8 inches, and so if I'm going to stitch 36, I need 36 or about a yard of the thread. I'm going to use my stretcher bars as a measuring. So here's 8, 16, 24, 32, and a little bit. So I'm going to start with my pink thread. And I'm going to start with a pin stitch again. And because my star is going to be really fairly solid along in here, I think that I'll be safe if I put my pin stitch right around over here. If I were working with a ribbon, I would have absolute confidence because I know that it would be covered up. And, you know, I'm not quite sure that it's going to be completely covered up, so I think that I will just do an away knot instead of trying to do a pin stitch and guess where it might be and then have it show because it wasn't the right color thread under it. And I don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about it, so an away knot it is. So I'll put my away knot, I'll weave the end in later. And my star is, my first stitch is going to come up 5 canvas threads above this shared hole right here. Okay, now I'm ready to begin with the first layer of my 8-pointed star, and I'm going to begin 5 canvas threads above this shared hole right here. So let me count up 5, and that's where I'm going to bring the needle up. Now this first stitch is going to end along this same line as this diagonal line here, and I'm going to find the 8th double cross. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here's the 8th, and that's where the needle is going to go in, right there. Okay, now I'm going to find 5 canvas threads from this point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this stitch is going to end 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 right there in this diagonal line. Now I'm going to come up here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this stitch is going to end 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 right there. Now I'm going to count 5 from this point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's going to end 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 right there. So I'd like for you to observe what I've got so far. It kind of looks like a lopsided tic-tac-toe, and these points line up and these points line up, and it lines up across here and it lines up this way, and then these points are all in line with the end points. So now that I have my first stitches in, I'm going to reverse the order that I've stitched in, and this is so that my thread carries on the back will be hidden by the threads in the front. So I'm going to, this is where I ended, right here. So I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to end in that hole, shared hole. And if I follow this line that's already here, I'm going to be bringing my needle up right there and ending in this shared hole. Then if I follow my needle up to here, this is where I'm going to come up, and I'm going to end right here in this shared hole, and then I'm going to follow my needle to here, bring my needle up. There's only one other place to go, and it's going to end right there in this shared hole. Now, I don't have enough thread to stitch another layer with this color, so I'm just going to pull it over here and let it dangle, and I'll weave those ends in later. But what I've got is, I've got the first layer of my 8-pointed star, and depending upon the thread that you use, this might be a fine ornament, just what you've got right here. My thread carries on the back are hidden by the threads on the front. I have 4 straight points, and I have 4 diagonal points. This is an 8-pointed star. Now when you're stitching this, if you start in a straight point, you end in a diagonal point. So here's, starts in a straight, it ends in a diagonal, starts in a straight, it ends in the diagonal, starts in the straight and ends in the diagonal. So that will help you to keep straight with where you are as you're stitching this. So now I'm going to take my second color, because I'm going to make 2 colors. And you know, you could use as many colors as you wanted to. You don't have to use just 2. Okay, that should be enough. Thread my needle, and I'll start with an away knot because I don't want to run the risk of a pin stitch showing. Now the second layer is even easier than the first layer, because I'm going to bring my needle up 2 canvas threads from the straight point, and I'm just laying my thread alongside the stitches that are already here. On the straight sides, you'll have 2 canvas threads between the points, and you'll have 1 diagonal on the diagonal sides. Okay, here's my first little tic-tac-toe. Now I'm going to reverse that. You're just laying your stitches alongside the threads that are already there. Okay, that's the second layer. I'm going to pull this to the front and just let that dangle. Pick up my first color again. I'm just going to wind off quite a bit of it. You know, with pearl cotton, you don't want to use longer than a yard at a time if you're stitching a tight stitch like Smyrna crosses or basket weave or something like that. But because the thread is not entering and exiting the canvas all that much on this, I can get away with using a really long length, and so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, I got my away knot. And I'm going to continue stitching layers until I run out of room and don't have any place to put another layer. So I brought my needle up 2 canvas threads away from this point and 1 diagonal there, 2 canvas threads here, 1 diagonal here. I'm just laying my stitches alongside the threads that are already here. When I was stitching the models for this little demonstration, I actually made 3 of them while I was in the car in about 2 hours. That was start to finish, all of it, including mounting the canvas. So, you know, this is, let's say you have your ornament exchange with your stitching group the next night, and oh my goodness, I forgot to stitch an ornament. Well, you can stitch one of these really quickly, get it finished, and still participate in your ornament exchange. That's one reason why I like this little design, because it does stitch up really, really fast, and you can use any threads that you want. I particularly like this when stitched with ribbons, like fireworks or neon rays or neon rays plus, or even just silk ribbon if you have some pretty silk ribbons that you'd like to use. It makes it's really pretty because it fills up a lot of the, you just see the color and you don't really see the structure of the stitch, although you can certainly tell it's a star. Lost my place for a second. Okay, there I am, right there. Looks like that's going to finish off this round. Now, because I have a lot of thread in my needle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my needle up where I'm going to need it next. So this, where the needle is pointing now, is going to be purple, with my purple thread. I'm going to stitch another pink layer. So I'm just going to bring the needle up and I'm going to park it. I always like to bring the needle up where I'm going to need it next, because that way I can park it on top of the canvas and I don't worry about the threads getting caught on the back. So let me thread up my purple really fast. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to bring my needle up here. I'm going to, let me pet that just a little bit to make sure it's laying the way I want. Your diagrams, your printed diagrams will show you each layer step by step. You'll have a diagram for it. So now I'm going to hold this thread out of the way to make sure I don't catch it as I'm going around this way. Remember that your stitches share holes. Okay, that finishes that purple layer. Looks like I have all of my purple threads in place. Okay, let's pet that just a little bit. I think that because I haven't ended off these threads, it's a little bit floppy, but you know, if I put a little tension on it, it all pulls down nicely. And I think I'll be able to get one more round with the purple, so I'm going to pull it up where I'm going to need it next. Now I'm going to pick my pink back up. It's ready to go because I brought it up where I needed it next. I'm going to stitch another round. Now this one I'm stitching from the outside to the inside, and that gives it kind of a raised appearance through the center of it. But you can also stitch this from the inside to the outside. So if you didn't have your double cross border in place, instead of coming this way with your stitches, you could have expanded them out this way. And that also looks really nice. It looks a little bit different in the center, but it is still really pretty. Just depends on how you want to approach it. I approached it this way because with the border in place, it made the counting very, very easy. I didn't have to count each individual leg of the first layer. But, you know, of course you can certainly do that if you want to do it that way. Okay, have I got pink all the way around now? Looks like I've got pink all the way around. I don't know if I'll be able to get one more layer with the pink. I'll see, but I'm not going to bring the needle up at this point. Now, I didn't make sure how this was I'm going to go ahead and bring the needle up. I may not stitch this layer, but I'm going to bring it up and leave my needle. We'll see if we can. You can make your first layer as big or as small as you want to, and make as many or as few layers as you want to. It still looks really impressive. Even with just 1 or 2 layers. Okay, now I know I wouldn't be able to get another layer with the purple, so I'm going to bring this to the front and I'll end it off and weave the ends in later. No, I think I'm just going to leave that for the moment. I'm going to do something else with that purple thread in just a minute. I'll show you what I'm going to do. So now I think I can stitch one more layer, so I'm going to try one more layer. Just going to make it nice and full. Without running into really having to manipulate my needle under the stitches that are already in place. Okay, one more stitch and I think we'll be done. There we go. Okay, now I have this beautiful multi-layered, all with just 2 colors. Wouldn't this be pretty if you know, some people are starting to decorate for Valentine's Day and Easter and St. Patrick's Day and other holidays like that. So you can certainly whip these out really quickly in just about any color that you want. So now what I'm going to do with my purple that I've still got, I'm going to stitch a star stitch right in the center. And so I'm going to find the center, which is right here. I'm going to count down 3. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to make an upright cross over 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Got threads hanging down there. And cross right in the center. And then I'm going to make a cross stitch on top of it. Not quite a Smyrna cross. This is just a little star stitch to fill up the hole in the center of the design. Okay, there we go. And so now I've got this filled up. If you wanted to, you could come in and put stars in some of these open spaces around, but I kind of like the open spaces, so I'm going to leave them. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thread, still threaded up, and I am going to finish stitching the double cross. And I'm going to do that by just stitching a cross stitch on top of the upright cross. Now, you could do this with a metallic thread. I also think it would look really cool if you see this hole that's formed by the where the double cross, the upright crosses intersect. Wouldn't that look pretty with a bead? For those of you that love beading, I like beads. I don't have to put beads on everything. I usually put metallics on everything. I don't have to put beads on everything. But I'll just stitch all the way around to get 2 colors into the outside edge. And you know, you don't even have to do this part if you don't want to. You can just leave it. And it still is going to look really pretty. I like it with just kind of the open look around it. This one is stitched with just 2 colors of number 8 pearl cotton. So, you know, if you've got pearl cotton that you had for a project and you don't use a lot of pearl cotton and would like to use it up, well, here you go. Here's a little project that will use up quite a bit of pearl cotton. You can also stitch these with floss. You can use metallics. They're great with things like silk lame braid. I really, really like them with Neon Rays Plus, and fireworks. I love the shiny ribbons and the metallic ribbons, and so they look really pretty like that. So I will finish stitching this off camera because, you know, it's just boring to watch somebody stitching a bunch of cross stitches. But that is all there is to this little simple star ornament.